My name is Alex Cortez. I'm a partner with Bellwether. We're a nonprofit that supports nonprofits, school systems, government agencies, and philanthropies in creating more equitable, effective, and efficient education systems from early childhood to K-12 to post-secondary to workforce. Our schedule over the next 58 minutes is I'm going to give a bit of a preamble and then introduce the leaders who are joining us on the call. I'm going to ask them an introductory set of questions, and then we really want to spend as much time as possible opening it up to your questions so this time is in service to you and the things you are seeking to learn. There's a QR code at the bottom of this that links to the case studies. We'll also put the link in the chat over the course of the discussion so you guys can find those easily. But first, sort of a few words about what brought us into this work. There are an amazing set of innovations in education that are demonstrating that with the right opportunities and supports, all students can leverage their assets and passions to succeed. But these innovations are often not achieving the scale we need. And I think a big perspective on that is because so many education reform efforts and also education philanthropic efforts follow what I like to call a field of dreams as theory of change, an homage to the 80s movie where someone says, if you build it, they will come. So we see a lot of initiatives where people are very righteous in their intent, and they start getting really fantastic results. And so it can lead people to believe that if they're simply righteous and get results, everyone will follow them into the field and systems will change. And unfortunately, this theory keeps falling short of creating the systems level change we want because it has two flaws, in our opinion. Flaw one, education systems are not rational systems. They're political systems. They're a complex web of money, power, interest, and values. And if an innovation to get to scale is going to disrupt that status quo of money, power, interest, and values, the systems are usually very well organized to preserve themselves. Second flaw is that so many of these efforts to change education systems often neglect to be representative of and responsive to the parents and communities they purport to serve. So the agendas of these efforts are often set by and reflect the value of people with privilege and in positions of power. And in contrast, these efforts often marginalize and alienate the very communities that these efforts are intended to benefit by imposing an agenda. And in doing so, disenfranchising the people they seek to serve. And so that's why, to us, it was so important to come to understand, and it's still a journey of learning and unlearning, how parent power efforts get started, how they scale, how they drive change, which is what brings us to our discussion today and the two great leaders who are joining us. Rather than me doing intros, because I think they can do much better justice than I can, let me open it up to Darcel to talk a little bit about Go Public Schools, what brought you to this work, and why is this so important as a passion and strategy? And then we'll have Michelle answer the same question.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Darcel. I'm the CEO at Go Public Schools. I've been with Go in this seat for just a little over 10 years, and with the organization a little over 4. I had the privilege of joining first as the COO, gave me a chance to really see our work up close. I'm a former educator and a former policy wonk and have been on lots of different sides of the table when it comes to ed advocacy and ed reform. And I think the thing that makes me so passionate about the work we're doing with family organizing is getting to see up close how it really mirrored my own journey. And so as I think about the experiences I had as a Black student growing up in the Central Valley of California, and just how different my outcomes are from even my siblings, cousins, friends, uncles, and other folks that look like me. When I reflect on that, a lot of the difference is the champions I had in my corner. And so at Go, we focus on family organizing. In the case studies, I know we talk about parents, and we early say like that is an inclusive term. And for us, that really is the thing. It's aunties, uncles, play aunties, godmothers, grandmas, everybody really finding their power and standing in that power and identifying the things that need to change in order to have better outcomes for kids. And so my story is very much that, especially some pretty incredible women in my life, my godmother, my mom, my grandmothers. And so it really just is core to who I am, and finding this organization and really getting in the weeds of the work felt like this was the right altitude for change. And that I wanted to be a part of bringing that to the rest of my seat. but in particular, the Central Valley. So we'll talk a little bit about that later in Go's strategic plan and our growth. But that sort of opportunity to make sure that this incredible thing that started almost 15 years ago reached more students really is what gave me the sort of courage to step into this role, as we're going to talk a little bit about transitioning a founder later on the call. And Michelle, I'll kick it to you.
Thank you, friend. Good morning, good afternoon, buenos dias, buenas tardes. Alex, thank you so much to Bellwether for hosting this webinar. Just really grateful. And Darcel, who I just have so much admiration and appreciation for as a colleague, as a peer, as a sister in this work. So thank you so much. Michelle Vilchez. So I'm super excited to be here. And I think when I start thinking about this question in particular, like, why am I so passionate to really think within the community that we're serving? I have to set the context. I am a child of immigrant parents. My parents came to this country as farm workers through different regions in the United States. And when they came to the United States, and they married, I was raised in a very rural community in extreme Southern California. Extreme Southern California, where I can say that just of last week, it was like 119 in the shade. And so that is not a community that I wanted to stay in. I decided to come to the Bay for school and stay here in California. But through that experience as a child of immigrants, growing up in a very low income community at a time where, all-time high law enforcement community violence was at an all-time high, where, dropout rates were at an all-time high, especially for communities of color. Was raised in a community that was predominantly Latino, immigrant, African-American, and Indigenous. So that really was the story. Later, my parents became faith leaders, and I remember I had to take 3 public school buses to my local middle school and high school, the closest one that was available to me. And when I arrived on those campuses, I was in trailers the entire time. My mother and father, even though they were faith leaders or farmers, they had multiple jobs to really sustain us. I'm the eldest of my family. And so, these were the circumstances that we saw. And it wasn't only the story that I was experiencing, it was the story that my neighbors were experiencing, and other children within my community. And so I think for me in particular, first and foremost, is that I can relate, I can understand. And I have had that experience as well, that I've heard from so many of our parent leaders across the United States, throughout California and beyond. So that's really stands out for me in particular. And so when I think about parent power building, I think about the increasing democracy across the communities that we're working in. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that, first of all? And secondly, I also think about the opportunity to lead an organization that is predominantly made up of Black and Brown leaders throughout the United States. And that's also something that I feel like sign me up for. Absolutely. I came through this work because our founder and the board of directors invited me to serve as co-CEO. So I was in that role for about 14 months before our founder decided to sunset his time with the organization. Then I was asked by the board of directors to serve as sole CEO. So I've been in that role for about a year and a half now. And that has been phenomenal experience. And I feel very much like this is just not a job for me. This is very personal. I live in one of the communities, have resided for more than 20 years with my husband and our 4 children in one of the communities that we organize currently in, that Innovate organizes in. So this is personal for me. There is an accountability, of course, to my board, to my colleagues, to the field, to the staff, but greater than that, there's an accountability to my community. And so I think that that's what holds me in this work and connects me so deeply to it.
Great. Thank you all for sharing your backgrounds. One thing that I'd love to turn to is having you share more about your models. And, this is a second in a series of webinars. We had the leaders and founders of Faith X for Education, Kids for Chicago, and DC Amplifying Voices for Education, talking about their experience in founding organizations, going very deep within, geographies. We wanted to have the second panel where we could focus on hearing how you all have, one, been successor leaders to founders, and two, because your models cover much broader geographies, multiple cities, state, even national, in one case, C4 and C3 work. So I wonder if we could have each of you talk a little bit more about sort of how you've thought about the models behind Go and Innovate.
Go, we have two primary organizations, Go Public Schools, which is our C3 and what most folks know us by, and then also Go Public Schools Advocates, which is our C4. And then our C4 operates a handful of PACs along with that work to do our political work. And being organized this way allows us to leverage a really, really broad set of levers and skills. It comes with its own complexities and things that you really have to think about when you're setting it up. But one thing that I appreciated as I learned more about sort of our system and our governance, how we were set up when I joined the organization, was just how nimble and flexible it allows us to be. And with us being multi-city and we're moving into a cluster model. So right now we have the East Bay region, which covers Oakland and the West Contra Costa School District, and then our Southern Central Valley, which covers President Unified. And then we're getting ready to pilot in the Northern Central Valley. So excited to talk about that in our strategic plan. What this structure allows us to do is ebb and flow. We can run elections in communities that want to do that work. We've done that predominantly in Oakland and West Contra Costa. We can do C3 work anywhere. And it also, in leveraging both those entities, has allowed us to create this coordinated network that allows us to amplify up to the state level. And that was really a big piece of when I came to the org, first as the COO, one of my charges was to help to build out that infrastructure as we had grown over the years. Our growth was pretty organic as well. So we started out as a single site, multi-stakeholder org in Oakland about 15 years ago. And then we grew to West Contra Costa as we saw really traction happening in Oakland and folks raising their hand and saying like, hey, I think that could work in our community. That's still very much a part of the way that we grow and the way that we come alongside communities. So it really is folks reach out, raise their hand and say, hey, like we're looking for something, or we have a similar issue, or we saw this piece of work that's happening. Let's start a conversation. And that is a big piece of our growth strategy. There are, of course, lots of rubrics and due diligence and all sorts of things that go into that decision to grow with the board. But that is how we went from a single site to multi-site. We just recently released our new strategic plan, which I'm super excited about. Happy to thought partner or like share that with anybody. I'm sure we can share it out after the call. And in it, we're really just doubling down on the last 15 years of lessons we learned, some hard fought wins and a few losses, and really looking to drive the work forward at scale. And so thinking about what are the things we can replicate, what are the levers that we can pull both easily and some not so easily, but really need to be pulled in order to create change. And then who knows, maybe someday we'll be in SoCal. Right now we're focused on Northern California though, and also excited to hold up in our strategic plan. We have a real focus on collaboration and partnership, which is one reason I'm so excited to be on this call with Michelle. We have been, trying to build an incredible partnership together, meeting, figuring out like, what are you working on? Where can we fill gaps for each other? Where can we create some synergies? And that as a transitional leader has been incredibly important as well. And not just from Innovate, from a number of the orgs that are represented on the call, really saying, here's our piece of expertise. Here's where I think you can add some lift for us, or we can add some lift for you, and figuring out how we can all like coexist and co-create in the space, eliminate some of the competition. I know we're going to talk about fundraising a little bit later on the call, and just get into that more cooperative space. In terms of our programming, we put a heavy emphasis on community leadership. And so that's really our core program, our family leadership program and other family organizing programs. We are really teaching skill there. Like our goal is that a family leader that goes through our program can organize alongside Go and lead campaigns, but also go out and make change on any number of things that are important to them. We know that Go will not be in every city or on every corner. And so we need to make sure that we are not the like spoken wheel and the holder of the information and the power and the skill. And so that's a really big piece of our community leadership work. And then information sharing and data analysis is the other cornerstone of our work. To be honest, even as organizers and policymakers, like half the time what comes out of in bill language or budgets is indecipherable. And so we are both focused on making sure things are understandable as well as translated and can reach a broad base of folks. And then that underpins a lot of the organizing we do. And so all of our campaigns are rooted in data. We walk alongside families to help ensure that they are able to leverage the data, decipher the data, and call for data when the data doesn't exist, and when it's not there to really tell the story of our lived experience. We were just on an all-staff call yesterday, and data isn't all quantitative. It is also very much qualitative. And how can we help to package those stories so that when we're talking with policymakers and decision makers, we're able to access those tables of power in the same ways that like our beautiful spreadsheets with student achievement data and attendance numbers look. So those I would say are the cores. Happy to dig into our C4 work later, but Michelle, I want to make sure I turn over to you to share a little bit about your organization as well.
Thank you, Darcel. So very similar to Go, Innovate started in the peninsula doing organizing work. One of our founding staff members, Jose Arenas, who is now our vice president, our executive vice president over organizing and strategy, really started the work by doing a ton of one-on-ones. A ton of relationship building that is core to who we are as an organization. And he was talking a ton to families within the Peninsula region. And honestly, he tells the story of walking out of one particular home 101 that he did with some parent leaders. And he went into his car and he just started crying in terms of being so moved and emotional about what he had heard from parents and the barriers that had been, intentionally put up in order for their children to succeed within this region. That sparked a number of parent leadership teams that emerged out of the peninsula. And from there, we just continue to grow, very similar to Go Public Schools. And so that growth went from the peninsula to the community of San Jose, to the community of San Francisco, and then our last edition was the community of Los Angeles. So across California, we're in 4 very specific regions. Those regions are saturated with organizers who work with parent leaders. We also have research and policy team members, very similar to Go, that are have their primary population to serve is all about parent leaders making the information digestible so that they can use it and utilize it towards their campaigns and seeing the wins that they are really fighting for. And so organizers, research and policy individuals, communication team members as well is really how our different regions are set up. So that's working in collaboration with different partners and districts, which is a really interesting relationship that we've had with our different districts within those 4 regions in California. And it ebbs and flows depending on the campaigns that they're working on. But we've really seen an increase in those partnerships as well. So along with Darcel, I completely underscore that partnership with other nonprofit organizations and other parent power building organizations is really critical. It's important for us not as only a singular organization to be pushing against the system or to building the capacity of our parent leaders to push against that system. It is more powerful when there are, 3, 4, 5 organizations within that particular organization or community and region that are building out parent leaders and parent organizations to push against that same system. So it's going to take a lot more than just one or two organizations. So that's why we're just so excited to be in partnership with Go and with others. I will also say that for the last few years, we've continued to also build out our national presence. Over the last few years, we've expanded to over 30 states within the United States. And the way that we're doing that is also through our capacity building training program. So we have a community organizing training program that has been really well established. And along with our phenomenal team who have collective experience of over 50 years, we also have a faculty of 10 to 15 experienced organizers that represent another 150 combined years of experience. So the idea is that the COTP is building the capacity of educational justice organizing. And we're doing that by providing high quality training and accountable structures for new organizers and also those who are looking to sharpen their skills. We're in the process right now of accepting applications, and it's a 6-month program that is designed to meet the needs of organizers across the country. A lot of our work through COTP then helps to initiate deeper work within particular communities. Just recently, we were in a community in Utah where they were bringing together, working in partnership with an organization, a collective organization there. And they brought together community leaders, parent leaders that represented over 7 communities within that region. We spent 2 to 3 days with them, really building up their capacity and doing some tailored work, but ultimately facilitating an issues forum where we could hear directly from parent leaders and community leaders about what's most passionate to them and how they see their campaigns formulating. That deep work has been really, we believe, a cornerstone to be able to replicate. We believe that we can use that same model and come into a community, support, and be invited into a community where we can support the work. But it can start with our community organizing training program. And, the most amazing thing about it that I really believe is the model not only shares the organizing model that we believe and really is the guide to how we do the work, but you also learn about the power of one-on-ones. You learn about how to build parent networking through house meetings, and what the meaning of real strategic relationships with key stakeholders and also public officials, and how to do that through research meetings. We coordinate meaningful community actions and events, and this is also true within our regions, and we want to share that good news with others. And we are really excited and feel that this is an opportunity and a time for us to continue to build organizers across the United States, especially given the pandemic and the experience that we've had just a couple of years ago. Research is we're just scratching the surface in terms of research and what it's telling us for our children and what recovery actually looks like, in particular for Black and Brown children across the United States. And so the idea of building more organizers across the United States, like expanding the opportunity for multi-ethnic democracy and leaders who can really lead and their efforts in their local communities and schools is really something that we want to be a part of and continue to strive for.
Thank you both for the intros. I want to switch gears. You're both successor leaders of parent organizing groups. There is this moment in time, be it in California where you all work or elsewhere, where there's a changing of the guard from founders, many of whom were white and male, to leaders of color, frequently Black and Latino women. What has been your hard-won experiences from being a successful leader, and in particular a successful leader of color. And any advice you have to either aspiring successful leaders or also in the funding community that supports them.
Yeah. Michelle, did you want to kick off or you want me to jump in?
Feel free to start us off, Darcel.
All right. I don't recommend doing it during a pandemic. I would say that's top tip. Both Michelle and I transitioned during the pandemic. I mean, that was just hard for everyone. And so an additional complication that I think exacerbates some of the really hard things, in particular fundraising, right? We were shut in our houses, disconnected from everyone. And that was, I think, a unique difficulty. For Go, I am following my predecessors, a white male. I think it really called us to like look at our model and really think about whether the org was set up to be able to support a black woman leader. So I am really grateful to my board, both my current board and the past board that selected me. I think that's incredibly important if you are a person thinking about following a founder or even just following a long-standing leader. It's really important to have really transparent conversations with the board. I'm really appreciative to, in particular, the women of color on our board that had some just really real conversations about how challenging that this might be, and also gave me the space to make my own decision. I initially said, like, no, I don't want this role. I had other things going on. I was getting married. I was like doing all the things, and the board really gave me the space for that to be okay, and for us to explore their options. Ultimately, I stepped in as interim. So I think if you're doing that one to boards, I would say select internals as acting. That's advice I got after we were already in the interim moment. It makes it a little bit challenging with funders because they're waiting for the next person. And so there was a bit of a pause for us on some of our funding work and other things that could have gone a little bit smoother. So those are two just like easy things. If you're going with an internal, make them an acting, empower them, give them that like external credibility. To just be really, really transparent with your boards. I think something that we have done more recently that I think I would wish I had done sooner is just like laid out the vision. Like I got really clear on what I thought was feasible, like what I felt well positioned to lead as a leader, but also for the org to do. And since releasing our strategic plan and since going through our restructure, we really just have this like energy and this synergy. And so as soon as you can do that, definitely take the time to have the conversations and do the real authentic partnership in communities. But the sooner the better that you can just kind of make it known where you're heading, and then give people the space to decide whether that's the right direction for them. And that's okay if it's not the right direction, both for staff and funders. Funders, I would say, stick with us, like give us a chance, especially for those of us women of color that are taking on organizations and trying to pivot them. It's not an overnight thing. I think as women of color also, it's expected that like you can turn it around overnight. Like, you know the issues, you're clear on the equity gaps, but all of that takes time, and sometimes even more time, depending on how much political capital and money capital that's going to take as well. So I think those are some of the things that I've learned from this transition. I'm incredibly grateful to everyone that has been supporting us. I still check in with our founder once a month. He's been incredibly gracious with his time. Many of the folks on our board were over their board term because of the pandemic. They stuck around, but they were really generous to have check-ins with me, kind of continue to help. So I would say those are my top tips. Like, build your board, love on your board, and make sure that you get your vision out there as quickly as possible.
Similar, I mean, Darcel, where was that advice like 3 years ago, girl? I wish you would have told me, don't take this on during a pandemic. It's been, interesting. I will say I would have not survived had it not been A, for the phenomenal board that we have as well, B, for the amazing, brilliant staff and leadership team that we have. And also, I got plugged in immediately because I was asking to be let into rooms, where it was Bahara for one, just like a huge shout out to the Bahara network and that family that really helped to support me through that transition. I was following not only my predecessor being the CEO, previous CEO, she was also the founder. So that also came with a number, a different amount of weight and responsibility. And we have two very different leadership styles and journeys, which is beautiful and amazing and phenomenal. It comes with a variety of different struggles, but I got plugged in immediately. I started saying, Darcel, can I talk to you on a monthly basis? Girl, I need to connect with you. Started talking to others across the United States that I have just like regular check-ins with about like, hey, am I losing my mind? Is it just me? I'm feeling this kind of way, or I'm just really exhausted, or I have this huge win and I want to tell somebody about it. Maybe it's not a win. You can check me, And so having those type of relationships is really important. We've talked a number of round, what it looks like for board support. We talked a little bit about board support and foundation or funder support. And I absolutely agree. I'm going to share that during the transition, it came back to us that one of our funders was really just authentically asking a question about, is this a glass cliff situation? Like, is this a situation where, a woman of color is following a founder or following a predecessor that is a Caucasian male? And what is this really setting? Are they set up for success? And that's an excellent question to ask. And part of my response has been to funders exactly what Darcel said: stay with us. We need you now more than ever. Right? And I want to say something that is not easy to hear, but it's also not easy to say. That, we've had some funders say to us, we support you, we're with you. We're so excited about your leadership and about where Innovate is going, but we're not going to be able to fund you anymore. Or we're not going to fund you at the amount, or this is going to be the last year. And I have said, I appreciate the words of encouragement and support, but I need dollars to do this work. We need dollars to do the campaign. Our parent leaders need support, and this continued work needs finances. So that's, may be hard to hear if you're a participant and you're in the philanthropic realm, but it is very difficult for us to say as well, we need your support. And I will say, not just dollars, we need your strategy, we need your network, we need your relationships. I didn't come to this role knowing, the 20 most powerful national funders personally. I didn't have it in my Rolodex. That's an old school phrase. I'm sorry. Rolodex is probably right. I didn't have them in my speed dial at all. And so it was cultivating those relationships and building trust and credibility, which takes some time. And so to Darcel's point, you got to give us a minute. Like where I was a year ago is not where I am today. And we just completed our theory of change we went through this theory of change articulation process. And we're so grateful for our history and the rich roots that were, the seeds that were planted, the roots that took to the ground. And we're excited to build and to continue to see what the next 10, 15, 20 years looks like. And it's not easy to say, hey, this has been really working for the last 10, 15 years, and we're going to adjust it slightly. It's hard to be the leader to come in and say, hey, we're actually going to change that. We're actually not going to do that the same way. We're not going to be structured the same way, or we're not going to look at our finances the same way, or we're not going to look at our development. It's hard to be that leader. And it's hard because not everybody wants to hear it or wants to be in that space anymore because maybe they thought we were someone else. So as long as our Northern Star doesn't change, I think how we get there can shift a little. And we're really given the responsibility to not only honor, I think that's also the difficult challenge. Sorry, Alex, I'm Mexican, so I tend to wander a little bit with but that's who I am. Thank God this is in English and not in Spanish. That'd be worse for me. I think that I think the most difficult part of our job is that we are the bridge for not only honoring the past and those leaders who planted those initial seeds and established this organization, but then we're the bridge to the future. And being that bridge holds a lot of weight. Before I went into nonprofit leadership, I had this crazy idea of being an architect. And what I learned about bridges is that they have to be designed a certain way. And so I would say Darcel and I and others are designed a certain way to sustain the bridging that we're doing from the past and the future.
Yeah, and Michelle, I'll plus one you not to leave you out on that glass cliff by yourself. Thank you for having the courage to name that. It's so powerful. And I'll say to those funders that said that a couple of years ago, it's not too late to come back. So I think we get it. And also it was a hard time. I started that off with it was the top of the pandemic. Everybody was strategic planning while we were strategic planning. And at the same time, we're still here. And so we want to have those conversations and bring folks back to the work.
I'd love to use that to pick up on a conversation that three of us had in preparing for this. And it's about sort of how you're leading your organizations through change, but what that means in terms of internal management. We had sort of discussed, when you're trying to lead an organization through change, the people who don't believe there should be a change. Then there are the people who believe there should be a change, but don't agree with your change. Then there are the people who agree there should be a change, agree with their change. It's just not what they want to do. And so you almost need people to make it all the way through. They agree there needs to be a change. They agree with your change. It's a change they want to be a part of. And that can lead to lots of different transitions. I'd love for y'all to share what you shared with me before about how you've thought about as you're steering the organization in a new direction perspective. How do you manage that internal change in talent, both incoming and outgoing?
Yeah, I can kick us off. Or Michelle, I saw you come off mute. Go ahead.
Oh, girl. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I'll just say honestly, because just between the three of us and all the 90 plus that are listening, this is our little secret. You go through, I experienced a range of emotions, for feeling, guilty or not enough, or what did I do wrong? Oh my gosh, you want to be on this, track with this anymore. Did I offend them or what? My own imposter syndrome that I fight with every day. That's just me as a leader of color, me as a woman, experiencing that. And I've come to the conclusion that I want to be I want to be a really good leader. I want to continue to strive to be better. And so that means that a couple of things. One is that I'm a big girl. According to my driver's license, I'm a big girl. And I can take hard feedback and input. You want to share something with me, you want to say, hey, I think you're all going the wrong way with this, and challenge me, hold me accountable. Same way, utilizing our organizing principles, have a conversation with me one-on-one and engage in the conversation, providing me with some feedback. Give me some time to really acclimate to that and understand what that means, and understand that it's input, it's feedback. I may take it or leave it, but I will, in all situations, appreciate it. I've also had to come to the conclusion that this train is going to continue, and it may not have the same people on the train, and that's okay. I want to wish them the best. I want to have our transition be successful for them as well. And I want to be a resource. There are many, actually a ton of, it's been an interesting journey because a ton of individuals who left the train are now back. Some of them on this call with us right now, who returned back because they were excited about what is happening. They're excited to see the vision kind of move from articulation to implementation. And so that's wonderful to see. And others that have started other work, and we cheer them on and want them to be successful. But I will also say, as we were talking, the other experience that I've had is that as transition has taken place, it has been an opportunity for new leadership within the organization to emerge. And that's been powerful and brilliant to see, and only further confirms for me that we need to spend as much time as we are building leadership externally. We need to not forget the internal leadership capacity building that we need to focus on, because I would hope that the new CEO, the next CEO comes from within, the next vice president comes from within, the next executive vice president, and so on comes from within the organization, and that we continue to cultivate their leadership, create space for it. So that certainly has been a journey, and it continues to be the journey. Darcel, give us your
thoughts. Yeah, I know. I mean, I know we've had similar journeys in terms of articulating a direction, following founders or co-founders. I too, I think, struggled for a long time in the role in wanting to, particularly during the pandemic, take care of everyone and make sure that everyone had a place. And we were able to do that and retain folks during the pandemic and take care of folks. And then there comes a time in your leadership where you have to figure out, like, what is the train or the bus going to look like? What are the seats, and who should be in which seats? So one, in terms of advice and just my own experience, like, find a great co-pilot. I'm excited that in our restructure, I was able to create a vice president role. We didn't have those roles before in Go. And so to internally promote a partner who's been an incredible partner, Natalie Walchuk, who's, I think, on the call. And then also partner with the board again. I think I'm just doubling down on how a really strong board, especially for a transitional leader, can be really helpful. And then shout out to Pi and my Pi cohort. Just in the last six months, and having just access to some incredible leaders across the country to learn from their experiences, wisdom, connections, and really building out the network was like the little extra push I needed to just really say, like, we actually need to flip the script and rewrite the org structure and have those conversations externally was a big one. We had a lot of external thoughts on what it should look like and what should be preserved and what shouldn't. And at the end of the day, in terms of the org structure, it's like, first, like, what do we need to have impact? Like, how do we need to be structured, and what roles do we need to serve families and kids? But then also, how can we take care of our staff internally? And how can we make the work more sustainable? And so those are a lot of the things driving the thought process around creating the various roles. And then I think similarly, we've got some folks that, like, went out on their own, started consulting gigs. We're now clients of theirs, and they're, like, living their best life, doing the part of their role that they loved, and we get to benefit from that. And then we got to recraft those roles into things that were more tailored and structured for other parts of the role that we needed. So that's been a really incredible experience for us. Thank you to those folks for keeping us on their individual journeys. And then right now we are hiring. So if Go sounds awesome, check out our careers page. But just bringing in folks that, now that we have our clear articulated journey, are like, yeah, that's the thing I want to do. I'm passionate about the Valley. I'm passionate about state policy. I'm passionate about kids in the East Bay. And we're just, like, ready to welcome them with open arms and just continue on this incredible journey for impact that we're on.
That's one quick follow-up on that I would turn it to the question of the chat. But both of you talked in your journeys today about your board, your staff, your team, even Beverly's family, but also network, be it Para or Pi. And it really underscores the idea that to go far, it's because you can go together with people who support you and who you support. Do you have any quick advice, like sort of a 45-second each sort of sprint on how people build those networks for themselves?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of free 99. And so I just kind of at the beginning figured out what were all the free opportunities or like folks that were really willing to just like have a conversation with me. And from there that, mushrooms and creates larger and larger circles. And then after that became a little more discerning around like, okay, how much time do I have to devote to this? But a lot of it started with um, just introductory conversations. I'm also a member of Leaders for Educational Equity, so I've used a lot of Lee resources. Go is starting a partnership with them. I think they're great. And so just really, as a new leader, kind of taking the time to try things on and figure out what works for you. We're in actually, Michelle and I are both in an EDs of Color circle that meets once a month on Fridays. That's been really incredible. So it doesn't have to cost a lot. I know that was daunting for me at the beginning. Like, I've got funders, I've got things, I'm trying to conserve dollars. I can't afford this or that, or I feel maybe guilty for investing in myself in that way. And so it took some baby steps and then getting to the realization that like investing in myself is investing in the org. And so also then really paying that forward, bringing back the learnings, all those things. So I would say start small and lots of recommendations, and then kind of build from there and figure out what fits your need and sort of time availability.
Love it. Thank you.
I agree, Darcel, with everything you said, and we are definitely in those circles together. I think the other thing I will say is that, and I made mention of it, ask other EDs. Like, it just takes one other CEO ED and connect with them. Darcel, what are you connected to? How can I follow along? Can you get me in the club? Kind of the, back in the day, get me in the club, girl. And so that's also been super helpful for me. But also the other thing is that I'm just really just create. If you don't see what you need, create it. Take the initiative, build it, create it. We are innovative, strong women and men of color and nonprofit executive directors. And I just want to say, the research really shows our longevity and our tenure depends on what type of support that we have. And so you can see a number of organizations from Building Bridges initiative to, I think there was, I read last year, Chronicles of Philanthropy, who put out a number of articles around nonprofit leaders and talked about the sustainability of nonprofit leaders. And in general, you only see about 20 to 30% of nonprofit leaders in general who stay beyond 5 years within their role. And that's like general. You talk about leaders of color in particular, it drops down to 5 to 10%. So when you think about that, we have to identify what sustainable networks and supports do we need in order to sustain ourselves in the role. It also, by the way, really talks about two major things. That one article, Chronicles of Philanthropy, also talk about two major things that nonprofit leaders need. One is money, one need, ongoing funding, and another is board support. So, Alex and Darcel, we talked about board support and the critical nature of a board. They play such a critical role as being a confidant, being the leader, governance, strategist, cling to your board, spend the time to develop the board. I'm so grateful to them for sure throughout this journey that has been phenomenal, amazing, and at times not so easy. So really grateful for their support as well.
I want to open it up to a couple of the questions we have in chat. I love the positivity behind this one, but can you talk about sort of the 1 to 2 opportunities you see on the horizon as you look ahead for 2024?
Do you want to hop in, Michelle? I'm just finishing up and type the answer in the chat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we just finalized our Ethereum change, and now we're in implementation process, which means that we refreshed our organizational structure. We have campaigns. So within our regions, our campaigns are full in effect. They're running strong. We're continuing to grow in partnerships and inherent leaders. We're deepening our relationships with existing partners and helping to continue to sustain our core leaders that we have. We're looking at some internal processes that'll help the work run better and be more successful. And then on a national platform, we're really looking to expand. As I shared earlier, our work within COTP, our community organizing training program, and wanting to touch more organizations and invite more into that opportunity. We're also looking to do follow-up deep work and working with local community leaders throughout the United States to implement a lot of what they learned through that training program. So that is on the horizon. The other thing that we're doing is that we're examining our name. Just to throw out there, we're examining what it is to be Innovate Public Schools. One of the things that we kept hearing through our articulation process is that, people sometimes think that we're a collective of charter schools, or they think that we're schools. So what does that really mean? And does it connect to parent power building? So more to come. It's something that we're struggling and wrestling with our board of directors and stakeholders. It's not anything that we've made decisions on, but it's definitely something that's on the horizon for us.
Yeah, and I'll hop in for Go. This actually is connected to the chat. We have some active campaigns. Actually, coming out of San Francisco yesterday was a court decision that affirmed the immigrant voting work that's been going on there. So families, irrespective of immigration status, are able to vote in school board campaigns. We ran that campaign in Oakland last year and won. So implementation, especially now that we're seeing the San Francisco verdict come down, will be a big one for us. So that will be, I think, pretty big for 2020. Could be pretty big for 2024. And then in terms of and that's our C4 side, but we'll move into implementation, which then comes over the C3. And then for our policy and advocacy and family organizing work, our families right now, one, they're working on special education. Our families created a beautiful guide that we are happy to share for families in West Contra Costa. And we're also looking for partners to expand the reach of that, ensure that folks are getting the services that they need. Special education students are some of the students hit hardest in pandemic in terms of not having access to their services and being able to be supported through that work. And so our families felt like that was really important and wrote a guide, and we are happy to journal alongside them. And then we're working on literacy and science thing, incredibly important in the regions that we are serving. And so we're just beginning that, welcoming partners to come alongside us in that journey as our families in the East Bay and potentially even the Central Valley work on that. And then English learner issues is a huge focus for our families. And so we're working on the master plan in Fresno. And I'm sure as other plans come up for review and revision, our families will want to weigh in there as well. They had an incredible action in May, circulated a sign-on letter and shared recommendations with the district for how we need to be supporting our English learner students more effectively. And then college access is a big one for us across the organization. And so our financial aid work and college access and affordability work will be dropping this winter and spring. So I welcome you to follow us and join in on that and partner if that is also a passion for you.
Thank you all. We are amazingly about at time. Thank you to both of you for sharing your wisdom and experience. Thank you to the attendees for joining us. Any final words, from each of you on, as people are leading parent organizing groups, any other just very tactical advice you have for other leaders aspiring to leading?
Yes. Sorry, I was I will drop my email in the chat for the college access work. And words. We, again, shout out to Pi cohort. We just finished up a retreat on sustaining oneself. I think that's maybe been one of my growth areas. My team will tell you. and learning just how to keep yourself ready for the fight, because it's a long one. It is a marathon of sprints, and really self-care, taking care of your team, and building that network, I think are the best things we can do for ourselves right now. Like, we're in for a fight. I mean, we're seeing the Supreme Court decisions come down. We're seeing attacks on reading instruction and culturally responsive teaching practices. Like, it is, especially for those of us that both live it in our identities and then come to work and do it for the work, it is a long road ahead. And so that is the thing most present for me right now, is taking care of oneself.
I agree. If you're thinking about starting a parent leadership organization, do it, please. We need more to be pushing against the systems on the issues that we've talked about, the issues that we've dropped in the chat. We need all of us to really work collectively and have a variety of different entry points. Organizing is one entry point. Organizing is a very effective entry point and tool to utilize, but please, we need more pushing against the system, more to really call out their experience, more individuals to tell their story, and to lead. It's not an easy job, but it's rewarding beyond belief. When you're in a place, a few months ago, we were in the state capitol together, Darcel, Go Public Schools, Innovate, a number of different organizations across California, and experiencing parent leaders and other community leaders who were meeting with a slew of legislators in state capitol. And there is nothing that can replace when you're in a space and parent leaders are telling their individual stories about how they're being impacted by the educational system. There is nothing that is more effective than that, than those stories taking place, and for elected officials to be responsible, accountable, and for parent leaders to really drive their needs and their attention, and that needing to happen now. So that is most powerful, most beneficial, and really worth the fight.
Thank you all. Thank you again to everyone who attended today. We will, I put this in chat, but we will be sharing both the video of this webinar and the prior webinar in the near future, and it will also be posted on the website where you can find case studies on Go, Innovate, as well as their peers at PAVE, Kids for Chicago, and FaithX. I hope everyone has a great rest.